Nathan was born in June of 1990. And as far as we knew, perfect birth, health, everything was great. And one night he had a seizure. He didn't respond to any of the drugs. Doctors didn't talk straight. They weren't going to tell us that your son might die from this, that this is that serious. They weren't that direct with us. I mean, they wanted to keep us at the hospital, and we said, "What can you do for him?" And they said, "Nothing." And then we said, "Well, then what are we doing here?" So we brought him home to die. When you lose a child, you lose all your hopes and dreams that you had for him or her. I would say that I went from terribly hurt, damaged by this tragedy to integrating it into the fabric of my being. And now it's just part of who I am. It's part of what defines me.
I'm David Neiman, and you're listening to A Better Pill to Swallow. She ran a marketing company for close to 40 years, helped start College Bound, a successful non-for-profit, married 42 years and counting. Welcome to Better Pill, Susan Weissman. Normally, when I introduce people, I usually say, but most importantly, if I know them personally, she's my mother, or and I can't do that with you because if there was ever a person that is not in our family that deserves an asterisk in our family tree, it would be you. You were one of my mom's dearest friends, my aunt's best friend, seriously dated my uncle before his first wife, and was my father's business partner 40 years ago.
Oh, God.
I mean, it doesn't get more intimate than that with our family.
And I've known you since you were, are you ready? 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I would have thought 0.
I didn't live in St. Louis when you were born.
3.
So when I came home, you were 3.
Okay. That was a good age for me. I was really cracking.
I'm sure.
In cuteness.
I'm sure you were.
Yeah. Because before I became an asshole.
You were adorable.
Well, I have wanted you on the show, as I mentioned last week, since it started. And it was something that I spoke to Amanda about. And I knew that based on where I was in my life and what my wife and I were involved in the trajectory of our family building, that I was not prepared to face this conversation. Probably much less so than you are at this point. But for the audience at home, Susan tragically lost her first son, Nathan, when he was not quite 2 years old in the early 90s. What year was it?
92. And he was my second child.
Oh.
Benjamin's older than Nathan. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So Benjamin was 3 when Nathan was born and 5 when he died.
And it also always sat with me because when I was younger, when you don't go through a monumental grief, and I don't know if this was your first monumental grief, nothing I'm sure can compare once it happened, but there was definitely an moment for me when Andy died, where it blew away so many of the other passings in my life on a level that was like a horror movie, like everything's different and it always will be from now on. And I couldn't even hold space for what grief and loss actually meant until I lost Andy. And the reason I bring it up is the only thing that made me realize, oh, this is really serious was, I don't know if you remember, but the 1 year that I was in choir for CRC, our temple, was the year we did that piece on Nathan.
Oh, the cantata.
The cantata.
Wow.
That beautiful thing that Bonashore, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right.
Yeah, Bonashore wrote,
Yeah.
That we
sang.
And
that was the main thing we drilled down on and worked on.
Yeah.
The 1 year I was in choir. At complete coincidence.
The beautiful piece, wasn't it?
It was, and it made me talk about it, think about it at a time where I wasn't actually capable of understanding grief, but that really already sat with me in the
Yeah.
early 90s.
Well, one of the things that I reflect on, I was just counting it. I was 36 when I lost Nathan. So, as a much older person now, I look back and realize how young I was. I didn't know anything about loss. I didn't have anything that prepared me for,
Both
um,
of your parents were alive and like,
yeah, I had grandparents still with me. I'd lost one grandparent, but he had lived to a ripe old age. It wasn't exactly a tragedy when he died.
right.
So I really had not experienced any significant loss. Yeah.
So before we dig into the implications and the details and the aftermath, bring us into the story of actually what happened.
So we had a healthy little boy. Nathan was born in June of 1990. And as far as we knew, perfect birth, health, everything was great. And for 6 or 7 months, we just were a family of four with two little boys, struggling with all the crazy shit that goes on with raising young children. And one night he had a seizure, and I'd never seen a seizure. I didn't know anything about epilepsy. And at the time, we were just told, well, there are all kinds of reasons a person could have a seizure. We didn't really know if it was a condition yet or not, but it turned out to be a virulent form of epilepsy, meaning he didn't respond to any of the drugs. We went through virtually every drug that was on the market and started trying drugs that weren't approved yet by the FDA.
Oh,
So
wow.
he had all kinds of seizures. He had something called infantile spasms, but he also had grand mal seizures. So he basically had seizures, little seizures all day long, and then some really huge seizures that would land us in the hospital. And we would go through various medical procedures trying to understand what was going on. And we sought medical care. We would have gone anywhere in the world to get the help that we needed, but turned out that the preeminent physician who was treating this kind of thing was in St. Louis, where we lived. So we had one of the best doctors in the world in our backyard, and we sought his advice. And what I didn't know while he was sick was that we were in a race against time. In other words, could we arrest the seizures before it created permanent damage to his brain? I didn't really
Right.
understand that until it was all over and done with.
Where was the science at the time in terms of the trajectory of where they were? Like, how much information did this great doctor have? What are the chances that he gave you? How much did he prepare you for what was to come?
Oh, well, those are two separate questions. So
Yeah.
I would say there's still a lot that's not understood about the brain. The brain is still a mystery. It still is today. We know a lot about the heart. We've learned a lot about cancer. It's not true that we don't understand a lot about the brain. Doctors didn't talk straight. They weren't going to tell us that your son might die from this, that this is that serious. They weren't that direct with us. So we had to figure things out ourselves because people just didn't communicate. Doctors didn't know how to talk to parents about something like this. So there was a
Wow.
lot of avoidance, and we had to read in between the lines. And at the time, this is before the internet. So Howard was going to the medical library at WashU to read up on it and learn about it and find different physicians around the world and talk to them and send some of our medical information to see if other people had other ways of helping us. In fact, your mom called and said, I saw this thing on the Today Show about this diet. Maybe you should try this diet. And I went to the doctor and asked about the diet, and we put him on what was the keto diet today. But at the time, in 91, when we did it, nobody had ever heard of it.
Right.
But they thought that might help. I mean, I took him to healers. I mean, everything you can imagine.
Is
But
there any legitimacy to the keto as it relates to seizures for young people?
I don't know. I didn't follow the science to find out,
No.
but it was something they were experimenting with at the time.
Right.
They didn't understand why these electrical charges are happening in the brain. And usually the medicine abates it, but it didn't. So then they were trying other things. He didn't have a brain tumor or anything that was physiologically obvious through any of the scans that they did. So the question is, why is this happening? We also weren't aware of anything in our family background that would cause, if it was hereditary, where did it come from in our families? Although what I suspect is it probably was in one of our families. Epilepsy was something people were ashamed of and they hid. So we wouldn't know if you go back several generations, maybe there was somebody who had epilepsy, but we aren't aware of it.
I mean, there was so
Right,
much avoidance and shame. I mean, when Andy in
right,
the 90s had bipolar,
right.
it was something that I didn't talk about because
I would say my grandparents, if it was in my grandparents' generation, it might have been something they hid, which is
right.
why we wouldn't have known if it was in our family somewhere. So, anyway, we couldn't find anything that worked. Nothing worked. And he had a life changing seizure in probably early April, meaning he was brain dead at the end of that seizure. He was still alive, but he was in a vegetative state.
It was just very clear in that moment. Like it happened at your house, and in that
No, no,
moment, it was
well, I don't even know where yeah, it probably happened at our house, but it was still going by the time we got to the hospital. And a lot of times when he was having a really long grand mal seizure, they would medicate him and put him into a medically induced coma. And then sometimes he came out of that coma, and this time he did not. So,
at this point, he's not quite two.
right, right.
So
So we brought him home to die. And we knew he would have more seizures and we would not respond to the seizure as we had before. So, in other
did
words,
you,
we let him die from his final seizure.
and you knew going in that was upon you at the time.
Yeah. Uh huh. Yes. I mean, they wanted to keep us at the hospital, and we said, "What can you do for him?" And they said, "Nothing." And then we said, "Well, then what are we doing here? Why would we stay in the hospital?" "Well, you have to bathe them yourself. You'll have to feed them with a feeding tube." I'm like, "I'll learn how to
I,
do that." So I did all those things, and then I brought him home. And I took him for acupuncture. I took him to healers. I took him to every ooga booga person.
so those were really groundbreaking in 90, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Can
So
you speak to what you guys were going through? And
I would say because we had been dealing with a pretty serious illness all along, what would happen is when we were in a crisis, we were all about just handling the crisis, and our
right,
feelings kind of went by the
putting up a
wayside.
placard,
And
right?
then when things calmed down, then we would feel our feelings and we would be sad and we'd cry in each other's arms and we would talk about our fears and what are we going to do and all that kind of thing. But I would say I had so much denial. I mean, the way that I functioned during that period was to not fully grasp what was happening. And
Totally.
that was just my innate
Coping
response.
mechanism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
You
Or I
have
wouldn't have been
to.
able to get up in the morning. Yeah.
I mean,
So, I
Andy, when
mean,
this, I did the
yeah,
same thing. Complete denial.
right. Yeah. And I respect that's the energy that allows you to keep on living and keep on doing what. And I had another child to take care of. So I
Right.
couldn't just go into a dark place. And I was still hopeful until the very last breath that there would be a miracle. And nurses told me about miracles, and other people told me about miracles. And there are all these crazy stories where people come back. And I am an optimistic person, and I believed it was possible. I prayed. Rabbi Talvi and Rabbi Goodman came, and we changed his name, his Jewish name, so the angels of death would not find him. We did everything we could think of to try to avert what we were looking at. But
This is as painful to listen to as I thought it would be. And I
I'm
know that if
sorry.
I, no, I mean, for anybody not tracking it that's listening, I have a boy that it turns 8 months tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so he's like my whole world. And not only is he like, it's happening literally over the last month or so that he's really becoming a little human. Before he
Mhm.
felt like almost like a little
Yeah.
puppy that I just had to take
Yeah.
care of, that like sometimes would make eye contact with me and occasionally would smile, but really just, it was just the shitting and eating machine. And
Yeah, right.
now becoming
He's a
my
person.
son. Yeah, he's a person and he's becoming my son.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just, it's very easy for me to imagine what you were going through, given the fact that I lost my brother tragically 4 years ago, and now
Right.
I have Asher, to
Right.
what the monumental pain was that you were facing, and understand that that optimism is connected to the coping mechanism. It's like we have to, in
Right.
moments of
Right.
desperation, because what else are you gonna fucking do?
Remember that I brought home a person who really wasn't exactly my son because he was, I mean, he literally would wake up in the morning and his eyes were open and he just stared and there was nobody home. And
Right.
I took care of that
What age did that
person.
start? I'm sorry to interrupt.
It
What
was
age
just
did?
the last 3 weeks of his life. Just
Oh.
3 weeks, 3 weeks. So
So
I
the
had,
seizure started, he was still
oh,
online.
oh yeah, he was
Oh,
amazing. He kept having these seizures and they kept saying, I can't believe he's developmental. He's still progressing. He was
oh,
still normal, and what they were trying to avert was a brain injury that would change the trajectory of his life. And again, what I thought that might look like is maybe he wouldn't go to college. That's me and with my optimism. It's like, oh, well, maybe he will never drive a car or go to college. Okay, I can deal with that. I didn't realize we were talking about that kind of brain injury, a completely no quality of life brain injury. That's what he had.
mm,
So I had those 3 weeks to recognize that I had really already lost him, even
yeah,
though he was still alive. And it doesn't mean that I didn't howl with grief when he actually passed, because it was awful to hold my dead. But
yeah.
um,
Can you before we move on into the next part of the story, can we can you tell me a little bit more about Nathan? His, like, as a person, like his
yeah, I
personality?
can.
I thought he was an
Yeah,
infant.
so
Like,
little. Yeah,
yeah. So, like, now that
yeah.
I know not that young, as someone who has an 8-month-old, I'd
Right.
love to hear, a little honoring of who the
Well,
little
I
guy
know
was.
now because I watched Benjamin, my other son, grow into adulthood, that those signs of who Benjamin would become were quite evident when he was this old. So now I do have a sense of who Nathan was, because Benjamin, when he would cut his finger, would act like life was ending. I mean, he was hysterical. And
Right.
Nathan would fall down a
Mm.
flight of stairs because he had a seizure and just get up and laugh. He
Right.
was
Wow.
unbelievably like resilient and funny. And I had to take him for blood draws all the time. And he was like charming all the nurses and just a sweetheart. And really, he was bruised and he was always having these medical procedures, and he was
Right.
just like, he was in the ICU making everybody laugh. He
So he was,
was,
like, very brave.
and I think sick children develop. I've seen this in other kids since then,
Yeah.
that they
Sturdiness,
develop. hmm a
grit.
toughness. He
Yeah.
had grit, and
Yeah.
he just had a light in him. So he was very affectionate, and he's just a sweet, easygoing kid. I mean, and I really am comparing him to my other kid who was more serious, an observer of life. He was somebody who would stand in a room and witness what was going on and see everything
Mm.
before he would try to do something. Nathan
Right.
just kind of threw himself into the room and
You just described as Benjamin. That sounds like somebody else that we both know very
yeah,
well, that you're married.
right. Yes, that one.
And it's funny that, like, how what different shapes and sizes kids come in, because what you just described with the, like, being afraid of shots and all that stuff, that was Andy. I was actually like a
Uh-huh.
little soldier. But
Oh,
I was also, when you were describing in seriousness, I was much more like Benjamin, and Andy was much more like. So it's just so
yeah,
cute and interesting that you can't really assume that kids come in like A and B. They
right,
become so individualistic at such a young age, is what I'm saying.
right. They really do. They really
Yeah.
do. So I appreciate that because I only had 2 years with Nathan, but I feel like I really did get to be his mom for 2 years, and I wouldn't trade that time for anything.
I wouldn't trade any of the time that I've been going through with Asher for anything. But the truth is, it wasn't until about 2 months ago that I was like, okay, this is amazing. Before that, it was like work. He's cute. He's fucking cute. He's cute. But, like, Please tell me he gets
I
better.
Yeah, I like the little baby time. I always did. I love the
Mm,
tactile, and he's very loving, and so I felt like even though he never spoke, he really never developed language.
yeah.
So I mean, mama and dada and a few things, but
Right.
we never had a conversation, but we had a deep intimacy over the
Oh
time
my
that he
God.
was alive. Yeah,
And that moment where you realize they're really getting who you are to them, and you're the
yeah,
world to them on a level that you'll never get back in only a
yeah,
couple of years.
right.
But
That's true.
to soak it up.
That's
I
right.
just have to say before I forget, so for everyone listening, Susan bought my son Asher this cute little light that says Asher that we keep right on the changing table. And he loves it so much. Like I hold him and he stares at it. And there's going to be a moment where he understands that's him, that light he's been looking at.
Yeah.
And he likes it so much that I actually have to hide it and turn it off because I can't change him because he's turning his body so he can stare at it while he's on the. So it's become like a negotiate
Wow, what a
with.
successful gift.
Too successful.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
glad. I'm glad.
So going back to the moment of holding your dead son and beyond, what is something that people often maybe misunderstand about losing a child who wasn't a newborn? That is there anything that like you realized as soon as he passed that was different than you would have expected?
I would say I didn't have any expectations. I had no idea what I was dealing with. I just didn't know. I mean, I'm looking back, what I will say is so many people said to me, and this was not helpful, but so many people said to me, there's nothing worse than losing a child. That's the worst thing that can ever happen. I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say to you because there's nothing worse. And as I've grown older and I've thought about that, I mean, first of all, how is that helpful to me?
I
Not.
have a friend who, after Andy died, said, "Oh my God, David, that is so horrible what happened to your brother. I just can't believe how
Right,
terrible it is."
right. Like, okay. What I would say is when you love somebody deeply, which of course I did with Nathan, but you did with
Yeah.
Andy, and people do with friends and
Yeah.
spouses. And when you lose somebody you adore, it I read this in a book. It's not my own idea, but I have embraced it. It tears a hole in your soul. When their soul leaves this world, it feels as if it's ripping your soul. And you heal, and there's a scar on your soul. It's so deep. And I really do think that can happen with anybody that you love deeply who you lose, especially in a tragic way, like we both lost somebody that we love. Somebody that we wish were still here, should still be here. It wasn't the order of life.
It brings to mind a couple of different things. One is there's nothing worse than losing a child and a young person because of the amount of life that was lost.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? But then
Yeah.
on the other side, you haven't had as much time in your life to invest and build the relationship. That I would imagine makes it less painful. Meaning, like if Asher died or Nathan died when he was 8, of that investment, it's just an interesting spectrum.
I don't agree.
You know what I mean?
I don't
You
think
don't
I
agree?
don't think time no, I don't think time in some ways it's like, well, aren't you lucky you got to have them for 8 years or 20 years instead of 2? I mean, when you love somebody deeply and they're torn from your life, it just
Yeah.
hurts terribly.
I've had other people that have unfortunately had losses the way that you did. And I've heard people say, well, at least they weren't a little bit older, so they were just a tiny little baby. It sounds to me like you're saying that's bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. So here's what you lose, and here's one of the things that I learned. Maybe this is the answer to your original question. When you lose a child, you lose all your hopes and dreams that you had for him or her.
Yeah.
When you have a child, you have all these imaginings of what they're going to be when they grow up and
Um,
what your life is going to be like and what your family is. And my family was this family of 4, and that's what I wanted. That's what I envisioned, and that's what we had. And I lost all the dreams that I had for this child. And so, um, learning how to let go of that and accept the new reality, which is no, my family's a family of three. It's not a family of four. Um, so there's a grief on a lot of different levels, I guess is what I'm saying. And part of it
Yeah.
is you lose some of your hopes and dreams for what you thought your life was going to be, what you thought your family was going to be, what you thought his or her life was going to be. And that's all part of the joy of being a parent, right? Is watching your kid grow up and watching them live into their life. And I didn't get to do that. And that was a
Yeah.
huge loss for me.
May I ask you, did you guys at least try again after that? Or were you devastated? You
Uh,
were like, I'm hanging him up. I'm fucking hanging
yeah.
him up. I gotta
Well,
heal.
so Howard had a vasectomy after Nathan was about 5 or 6 months old because we thought we had two healthy sons and that's what we wanted for
Yeah.
our family.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then after Nathan died, I really wanted more kids. And I was 36 when he died. And then, I asked Howard to have a reversal of his vasectomy, or I said, could we adopt? Or, all the
Yeah.
different ways, could I be artificially inseminated? I mean, I did a lot of
Can I leave
begging.
you and have
Yeah, right. And actually, we did go into therapy about it because how do you compromise about this? And Howard's a psychotherapist, and his feeling was that we had been through a terrible trauma, not just his death, but really a good portion of his life, had been very difficult because he was so sick. And the impact that that had had on Benjamin, we were worried about Benjamin and his well being. And Howard felt like the best thing we could do as a family was to heal as parents and to try to help Benjamin be okay, given what we've just been through as a family. And that if we had another child, it would be a distraction from really the work we had to do psychologically to heal. And that we
Mm,
would end up with kind of two separate families because by the time we had another kid, Benjamin would be 7 or 8. So they would be really far apart in age.
mm,
And so we
yeah.
would end up with this divide and conquer kind of family like, okay, you stay home with the baby, I'll take Benjamin to the soccer game. We would be doing that kind of thing a lot. So
Right.
he really didn't want to do it. And I really begged. And like I said, we ended up in therapy. And if you can believe it, because in my way of thinking, therapists are not supposed to ever express opinions. Our therapist said, I agree with Howard. I'm like, what? You
Wow.
can't say that in a therapy session. He's like, I've
Was it a
listened for a
man?
long time. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And he
Right.
was a very good therapist. Let me just say he helped
I'm
us in
sure, but
many,
that doesn't age
many,
well.
many ways.
That woman in this situation.
Well, he really felt that it was a better thing for our family and our marriage to not have more children. Then
Okay.
I had to ask myself the question, like, okay, how bad do I want another kid? I could divorce Howard. I could find somebody else. I
You
could get
considered
married. I thought about all
you.
those things.
Okay. Wow.
No, I really thought about it because I really, really, really wanted more kids. But part of my wanting more kids was because I was hurting so bad from losing Nathan.
Of
And
course.
I
But that's a
decided I loved Howard too much and I wanted Benjamin to have an intact family. And it took me a lot of years to let go of it, but I
and he
did.
went through that loss too.
Right,
Right. Right.
right.
Do you think it would have helped?
I don't.
And
Because there's
and
no
maybe
replacing Nathan, right? There's no replacing Nathan.
well,
Nathan.
no, I mean that doesn't mean it couldn't have helped some of the healing if you did. I mean, I don't know if this is a painful question for me to ask you.
You know
Was there
what I'll
resentment?
tell you?
What?
There's grandchildren have helped.
Uh,
I have
so
grandchildren now. That's helped,
not
but I'm in a different place in my life. I don't know that it
yeah.
would have helped. I don't know because it's the path not taken. It might
Certainly.
have helped me, but it might have screwed up my marriage. And then where would it's like
Right.
pick your poison.
Yeah. I was about to say, also it certainly helped my mom since Andy died, me having Asher. I mean, there's something healed in my mother
Yeah,
since
yeah,
his birth.
yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, babies are really joyful. They're
Yeah.
really, and just looking at the world through a child's eyes is
My
really
God.
amazing.
We live on the Hudson River, which, by the way, is where Andy actually perished. Not the
Yeah.
exact point where he perished on the
Right.
Hudson River, but there is
Right.
a poetry to the fact that I bought a house 3 months after Andy passed on the river where he died. But when Asher gets up on our couch, he crawls up now on his couch, which he now knows how to do. In short order, went from now he knows how to crawl to that's all he ever wants to do. And he's fussy if we don't let him. But he crawls up, and the look of wonder on this kid's face, just taking in the world. It just the biggest
Yeah.
snowstorm of my lifetime just happened. So seeing how the
Yeah.
world is now all of a sudden white instead of green, it's so profound and so
It
special.
is. It really is.
You
It
know,
never gets old, seeing a little person discover the world around them, having a front row seat to watching that happen. I'm glad you get to have that, David.
so glad. And I also only recently got a shift from Amanda from in terms of the second kid. Fuck no, we're not talking about it right now. Please let me heal from what I
Yeah.
just went through. You did not go through
Right.
at all. Into now that he's become so delicious every day, she's like, all right, yeah, okay, I'm open to it. I'm like, thank God, because that's the other layer, and it's connected to what you were just talking about. But my brother passing and the profundity of my relationship with Andy and Emily, I
Yeah.
would never in a million years dream of depriving Asher of that relationship, of a
Well,
sibling
that's one of my
relationship.
great sadnesses also,
Yeah,
is Benjamin doesn't have a brother or a sister. And for
yeah.
a while, my strategy in getting Howard to change his mind was to try to get Benjamin to ask Howard for a brother or
Oh,
sister.
billion.
I thought that would be easy. Benjamin was like, "I'm fine." And when he was 5 and 6 and 7, he's like, "I'm cool." He would not participate. I don't get it. Yeah, the very
Yeah, I
idea.
know. Well, that's the thing. I mean, like sometimes also like you don't know what you don't know in terms of the
Yeah.
loss. I kind of
Right.
like scolded my friend who was for having one and done, my good friend Igor, and I was like, "Only doing one?" And he goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Why?" And he goes, First of all, I like having my life. I like being able to
Yeah.
manage my life in a more
Right.
orderly, controlled way."
Right.
And he's like, "Not for nothing. I'm an only child. I loved my childhood. Are you saying that?" I'm like, no, it's good. It's fine. It's like, this is a fair point. He's like, if I hated
Yeah.
my childhood, being an only child, then that would make more sense. But,
Right.
you know,
Right.
that was just from my shitty, condescending perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I get it. I mean, I came from a family of 3 too, David, and my siblings have meant a lot to me. So I wanted to give that to Benjamin. It was a great sadness to me that I couldn't. Luckily, he married a wonderful woman who has siblings, and he now has 2 sisters and brothers-in-laws and a busy, full family.
that's
And he has
beautiful.
2 daughters. What I did tell him is, you've got to make great men friends because you don't have, brothers. And he did. He has some amazing friends that are his brothers in many, many ways. I felt like that
Totally.
was important. If he was a girl, I would have said, you've got to find some great girlfriends. I just felt
Uh-huh.
like that was like an essential thing, to have that kind of closeness and
Right.
support in your life.
So going back to the grieving process, it was unsafe and uncomfortable for the most part for me to talk too much about Andy when his bipolarity first happened.
Yeah.
The culture was in a different place, and I'm wondering, and this might not just be because of the discomfort of the past, but also maybe even the present, because losing a baby is such a special sort of grief and terror. But did you find yourself not talking about it with exception of an inner sanctum? And when it came up, did you find that people were really uncomfortable?
The
How did
two
you
go
find?
together. So people were horrifically uncomfortable.
Right.
Um,
That's what I
I'll
figured.
just start with the funeral, where everybody at the funeral was sobbing, and I'll tell
Right.
you why they were sobbing. It was partly for me and for my family. and partly because
Yeah.
every parent in that room was imagining their child dying.
Right.
So whenever I would run into anyone at the grocery store or anywhere I went, they would come unglued because they were so scared of the loss that I had experienced. And what I would find is that I would have to take care of them because they didn't know what to say or how what they were just freaking out. And it was so annoying because I am in so much pain.
Yeah.
So Howard and I stopped going out. I couldn't bear to run into somebody at the grocery store or at the mall or at the park or wherever we were. I just couldn't stand the running into somebody who I hadn't seen in a while who would say, "Oh, I heard. I'm so sorry." And then a lot of times, no matter where we were, that person would start crying. Um,
That pissed
so
you off.
it,
Is that what you're saying?
it just wasn't, yeah, it pissed me off.
Exhausting.
Or let me just say, it was not supportive to me. I was very aware. I mean, I was in a fragile state and I needed to take care of myself and I didn't have the energy to take care of other people. So I really just stuck to the people whose presence felt good to me. And even some of my good friends, for a while, it didn't feel good to be with them. I mean, there were certain people that didn't behave in a way that felt supportive to me, and I stayed further away from them. Howard and I got along really amazingly well. He always says, I mean, a lot of families, I forgot what the statistics are, but they're huge, of people who get divorced after they lose a child.
Right. I've
And
heard.
yeah, it's really high. So either it makes you stronger or you fall apart. And because you
Right.
do grieve differently. And so you've got to be able to support each other through very different kinds of grief. And we did that really well. And we're really great friends to each other during this period and really had an ability to talk about it and process it. And so being together felt good. And certain very close friends felt great to be with. Howard and I went out, a couple times with some couples on a Saturday night a few months later.
Right.
And I couldn't sit around and talk about movies and politics and books and shit. It was just it felt totally like, I got to get out of here. I can't do this. So we stopped socializing for a while. It seems
It's meaningless.
meaningless. Yeah. It's just chit chat. And I couldn't do chit chat for a while. I wasn't sure I could ever do it again.
For me, I'm a very big Cardinals fan, and I couldn't watch 3 seconds of a baseball game after it.
Right. What's the point? Yeah. Who cares?
But anything that was meaningful, like a meaningful movie, or no, that I craved more than ever. We watched 6 Feet Under after Andy died, and it was exactly what I needed because it was meeting me where I was. Anything that can meet me where I'm at.
That's right. So for me, that's when I really got involved with going to synagogue every week. I went to synagogue every week and got to know all the people who were saying Kaddish for people who had passed away. I felt like every Torah portion, every sermon that Susan Talvey gave was like therapy. It had deep meaning to me. I can sit through those same things now. I don't feel the same way. But at that time, everything spoke to me. Those kinds of things spoke to me. So I got deeper into my spiritual life and very close to a very small group of people and just kept my life small and tried to heal. And I needed to talk about it a lot. In fact, I also went into therapy while Nathan was dying. And Howard was like, "What is the point?" Now remember, he's a therapist. He's like, "What is the point? You can't change the trajectory of this." I'm like,
You're not ready to do this kind of thing?
Yeah.
Like you're not ready for therapy yet? It's too fresh?
Well, I needed to talk about it so much that I just felt like I was going to wear out the few people that I could talk to. And so I had another person I could talk to who was a very wise woman and really helped me process the whole experience. And that's what I needed to do.
What support looked like to you was to have deep conversation about all of the implications and all of the meaning of losing Nathan, and not other people breaking down emotionally in front of you. Although if you were sitting for a long period of time and it was sort of earned, I imagine that would probably feel good to you.
Right.
But the
Right.
drive-by tears was what felt
Yeah.
like, accosting of, okay, I'm
Right.
sorry that this happened to you now.
Right.
Yeah, got it. I mean, that's the thing, is that it feels like we still live in a culture that is so hyper focused on productivity and making money and presentation. I have an Israeli friend, and I've mentioned this on an old podcast, that around the office was like, I find it very strange how obsessed Americans are with birthdays, and how there's no space held for when people pass. People don't want to talk about it. People don't want to
Yeah.
have that moment, which is just as important. And in fact,
Yeah.
you could make an argument, if you're just talking about a birthday, not a birth, but a birthday,
Right.
it is
Right.
relatively
It's
meaningless in
true.
comparison to a person dying,
Yeah.
you know?
One of the things that it seems like we reflected on a lot was there was this sort of Jackie O legacy, which was there was Jackie O after her husband was shot and killed, and she
Totally.
looked beautiful and she had stature, and there was her little son, with the salute and the
Composure,
perfect little outfit, and they
composure.
were all composed, and that was so highly regarded. So it was like a value that somehow became part of Americana. And yeah, I struggled with that because here's something that I find interesting. In the Jewish religion, one of the things you're supposed to do after somebody dies when you're sitting Shiva is cover the mirrors. And you're not supposed to look at yourself. You're not supposed to even shower. And I'm not a deeply religious Jew, and I didn't really understand that tradition. So that's not what I did. I did take a shower and I put on my makeup and did my
What are we,
hair.
animals? Right.
And then people came over to my house, but I had this experience of looking at myself in the mirror, and I looked like my old self. And inside,
Yeah.
I was destroyed. And it was
Right.
very disconcerting, actually, to see that I could present myself as totally fine, but I'm not fine. And, it's so much more cohesive to actually look like shit when you feel like shit. But I didn't know that at 36. That might have actually been a ritual that might have been useful to me to allow myself to look as bad as I felt.
Right. To not focus on appearances right now when you're going through something
Right.
so profound. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
So
the Old Testament had it right in certain ways.
they
Very, very
did.
wrong in others. They got it
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel any pressure, either internal or societally, to move forward, to move to the next step, to get over it?
Yeah. So when we were approaching the anniversary, the first year anniversary, I was terrified because I felt like that was a line in the sand and you could do anything the first year. I had a pass because my kid died. Everybody knew it. And I could do anything crazy. And you remember
Yeah.
she's the one whose kid died.
She's the
But
lady,
after a
right?
year, I felt that I was expected to rejoin the human race and be okay. And I still didn't feel like I
We're
was
over
okay.
it. Right.
Right, right. And everybody was like, oh, of course, the first holiday, the first birthday, the first this, the first that, those are all very difficult. But, after that, you're supposed to be okay. That first anniversary with terror actually had some really important conversations with Susan Talvey about it because I was so scared. Again, in the Jewish religion, we did a ceremony at the grave and placed his stone at the grave. And I was like, just dreading the whole thing again because of what I thought it marked. And I had to learn really to give myself permission to just heal in my own time, in my own way. And that was hard. That was really hard. And I don't know if this is actually connected to your question, but one of the things that I ended up doing over the years, which was really also healing for me, was Lisa and Susan Talvey and I taught a workshop on grief and the rituals around death that are in the Jewish religion. So again, I was in this death space. So I was really interested in studying the rituals that are in our religion that you do around dying and grieving and understanding them, understanding where they came from, and then deciding which ones I would use in the future. I didn't really make a lot of conscious decisions with Nathan because I just didn't know anything. I didn't even know what the rituals were, really. I just followed whatever Susan told me to do because I didn't know what else to do.
Right.
And she was making choices. Let's do this. Let's not do that. It was probably a couple years after
Yeah.
Nathan died that we did it.
Well,
But it was
it's
really a great part of my healing was I read all these books on where these rituals came from and grief. Again, there were no books. There were really no books on parents telling their stories about their children dying. Today there are, but there
oh,
really
I
weren't.
know.
In 1992, I couldn't find anything to read that would help me see what a path forward might be. But there were things in my religion about just the rituals around grief that were helpful to me.
I mean, what you're talking about is central to why I created this podcast, is that I think we need to have more forums to get the word out of
Right,
how it's connected to our mental health. And we should not have the discomfort of talking about it. It shouldn't be
right,
off-putting. We should all be able to
right,
hold space for what other people are talking about. So we're the other people, meaning the people that it didn't happen to, are comfortable to offer
right.
what real support looks like that you have
Yeah,
said didn't happen with you.
right.
Um,
So the one thing I'll say is it's so simple how you can support somebody who's had a loss, a tragic loss. When you don't know what to say, you just have to acknowledge it, not acknowledging it's terrible, and just say, I'm sorry, and I'm thinking about you, and not be
yeah,
afraid to say the person's name. It feels good to hear Nathan's name. I mean, one of the
yeah,
reasons I want to do this podcast is even 30 something years later, I like remembering Nathan. He was an essential part
right.
of my life, and
So,
it's important to me.
and he's honored every time we talk about him. It's something else that I have mentioned on this podcast in an earlier one is that what I learned about grief is that the tears are the easy part. That's the easiest part of grief because when I smell something or I hear a song that I associate the Indigo Girls, Closer to Find is like one of the big
Uh huh.
ones.
Uh huh.
I'm devastated. In the moment, I'm devastated at the longing of I'm thinking about it right now and I'm getting emotional of no longer having him in my life. But it's also the beautiful part because it is the closest I feel to Andy and my love for
Yeah.
him. And the
Right.
harder part of grief is when I don't feel my emotions and I feel angry or I feel distant. And that's the
Yeah.
gnarly, horrible part of grief where
Yeah.
if it was just the soft, at Shiva where you're crying and you're laughing about how much you love them. I mean, I love that. I mean, that is it may be sound ghoulish to say, but like I love being at funerals because it
Yeah.
is the stuff of life and it's so connective and it's so filled with the love you have of the person and the love that the other people that you love have for that person and how that connects all of you and
I
that in
like
that network.
funerals too for that same reason. I love hearing the
Yeah.
story of people's lives. I love hearing the people who love that person get up and share what their relationship was like. It's very meaningful
Yeah.
to me. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm with you.
It's the weeks
Yeah,
following the funeral that are the hardest.
yeah. I never
Yeah.
got angry. That's something I know that's supposed to be a big part of
Yeah, me neither.
grieving. Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say never got angry. Um, I got angry at people who were alive in my life.
Yeah.
And maybe
Well,
that was displaced anger. You know,
correct.
ever asked the question, like, why did this happen? Why me? I never felt like that. I always felt like, why not me? It got to happen to somebody.
Yeah.
What makes me think I'm special that it wouldn't happen in my life? So, shit happens. So people live with all kinds of awful things, and this
Right.
is my cross to bear. Um,
Yeah. The first cut is the deepest. And I don't know if this has happened for you, but the word is not gratitude because there's no part of me that's happy or grateful that Andy died, but because I mustered through that monumental loss and grief, and I'm largely on the other side of it now, when other new losses happen, I lost one of my best friends from high school. Funny enough, my best friend from high school died 3 weeks before Andy did in time,
oh
Jason
my
James.
God.
And,
Wow.
and then I had grown pretty distant from him by the time he died. And I almost felt like, thank God, because it happened right before he passed. I couldn't handle
Right.
that at. But then I've just
Right.
also lost one of my closest friends from high school in the last year or two, Eliza, who passed away. And
Oh my
when it
goodness.
happened, I could literally feel it not hurt as much than it would have. It
Yeah.
was just this weathered from the storm, calloused feel. Not, and I cried, but it was,
Yeah.
I won't be destroyed and spooked by this in such a way that I can't manage moving on. And not in a way, it almost made me braver and not have to deny it because of my experience and comfort in it. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? It almost
I do.
handle because I'm like, all right, let's talk about it. Let's get in there. Let's cry about it because it's not too much for me after what I've been through. You
Yeah.
know? For you?
I feel like, yeah, nothing could ever hurt as much as that hurt. And so nothing scares me anymore about whoever. I mean, I know I'm going to lose more people that I love. I get that. And I know I'll grieve their losses, but I can't imagine ever being as
It won't.
devastated.
It won't.
So, right. It can't
That's
be.
scary
Right.
now. That's the
Right. It
thing
is.
that
Right.
us grievers, God damn it, we
Yeah.
earned that right to feel that
Yeah.
way.
That's right.
Facing the last stage of life that we're both
Yeah.
headed towards, it is a little bit less daunting to manage
Yeah.
all of the losses that are ahead of me, knowing, okay,
Right.
I know what this
Right.
looks like,
Right.
right? Is there some ritual or perpetual habit or thing you did, particularly more in the years following, but maybe still to in order to honor him, remember him? I imagine you
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So every April 29th, that's the day that he died. I always took the day off of work. I usually didn't really talk to anybody or answer the phone or check email or do any of that. I bought this beautiful antique trunk, and inside of it, I put treasured objects that remind me of Nathan.
Mm.
So some of it's clothing, some of it's pictures. My family and close friends made a quilt, and each patch of the quilt is a memory of Nathan. And I hung it for a long time. Now it's folded up and it's in this trunk. People wrote articles and wrote different things to me. I have all those things in this trunk. And so on the anniversary of his death, Howard and I always go to the cemetery, and I spend some contemplative time journaling and thinking back. And a lot of times I garden because it makes me feel connected to the earth. And I used to listen to the cantata, David. I had a tape recording of it, and oh, it's on like a tape now, so I haven't listened to it in a long time. And I go
I
through the
can't hear
trunk.
the name Nathan now without hearing Nathan. When people introduce
Yeah.
themselves to Nathan,
Oh,
I'll hear the
really?
echoes of Tonya Shore's song. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Of
So I go through that trunk and I just go through those memories, and I just spend a very quiet, contemplative day. This year is the first year I had to. I'm the president of this little organization. I had to agree to make a meeting on April 29th. It just worked out this year. And I finally thought, oh my God, Susan, after 34 years, I think you could have a meeting on this day and it wouldn't be a disservice to his
it
memory.
wouldn't be blasphemy, right?
Right, right. But I literally have observed this for
Yeah,
decades and decades, and
absolutely.
it's been important to me. Just a quiet, contemplative day where I immerse myself in my memories,
Well, that's
and
very Jewish.
it
Yeah,
feels good. It just feels good, and it changes. I mean, what I think about over the years has evolved,
of
and
course.
that's an evidence to me of healing, of progress, of, you know, I would say that I went from being terribly hurt, damaged by this tragedy to integrating it into the fabric of my being. And now it's just
Yeah,
part of who I am. It's just part of what defines me, but I don't carry it like a,
a cross that
I
you're
don't
bearing.
know. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. I mean, what you're describing is how to successfully live and I would say even conquer grief. Not conquering grief as though you're squashing it, but just using it in a way, I would say, like anything, like the whole point of existence, of life itself, is to take the lessons, certainly the big ones that we can,
Right.
and use that to
Right.
level up to enlightenment. And that's why
Yeah.
I was speaking in our last podcast about, we're in an age now where all the information that's coming at us is almost too much. And it's creating, I think, a lot of conflict about what reality is. And there's a lot of combativeness. It's really hard to hold all of this new information that's coming up, because we're now challenging the very infrastructure of life as we know it, meaning authority of what we were told, the stories we were told about how America was created, the way that the industrial complex manipulated, for instance, the food pyramid that I grew up with was
Yeah.
created and propagated by the cereal companies that said that we needed carbs more than anything else. I just
Yeah.
draw that as an example of, we're learning so much about either
Right.
lied to or told the wrong story. And it's has created so much tumult now in the modern era. And the way in which we can come into enlightenment is with curiosity and integrating, like we're talking about, the information to become more evolved,
Yeah.
instead of looking everything as a negative thing, or your reality is different than what I had accepted, and therefore you're wrong and stupid and I'm right. And I just wish that we could all learn how to live together and see these things and this information and these
Yeah.
experiences as a gift instead of a
Yeah.
curse.
Yeah. You said it earlier in our discussion that you would never wish Andy to be gone, but you appreciate all the wisdom that has come in the wake of his loss. And I feel that way
Right.
too. I would trade all the wisdom in a heartbeat to have Nathan with me, but I can't do that. And I can honor his memory by having grown and learned, and my life being forever changed in some ways for the better. Because there's
Right.
just no way you can know certain things until you've been through certain things,
I
right?
know. Yep, it's the whole tricky beast of ignorance. Of like, you
Right.
you can't
Right.
you can't know what you don't know until you know it.
Right. It's very humbling. So, what was one of the big lessons for me at 36? I was running a business. I had a very busy life. Things were going great. And I thought I was in control. I thought I was managing everything and that everything was basically within my control. And whatever happened in my life, I thought I was manifesting. And this
Right.
was 100% out of my control. It didn't matter how much money I had. It didn't matter who my contacts were. There was nothing I could do to save my own child. And the reality of that was shocking to me. It changed my whole, really humbled me in a way to realize that. And I had a number of Christian people tell me this was God's plan, right? That you can't see it, but God can.
Right.
And you're looking at the underside of the quilt, but this is all part of God's plan. And I'm like, no. God doesn't take an innocent child because it's part of God's plan. I don't believe in that kind of God.
Right.
But so then what do I believe in? That the world is chaos, that shit happens, that our job, what is holiness? It's our response, because we cannot control what
Yeah.
happens in the world.
It takes a lot of nerve to say that to a woman that just lost her 2-year-old son.
It was said by people who were super religious, who really believe it and
Word.
thought it would offer me comfort. I think
Right.
they offered it with that in mind. I really think their heart was in the right place, but man, did it land in the wrong
Oh
place
my
for me. I was
God.
like,
Yeah. No, I
yeah,
don't like that. It's called rescuing someone. I
yeah,
mean, that
right,
you don't rescue someone when they're in that fresh grief. That's sort of a
yeah,
no-no.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I just touched on, as you heard in the podcast with my mother, my father's first response out of his mouth the second I told him Andy had drowned and died
right.
was, remember this moment that he said, "This is David. This is the best thing. This is the best thing. He's at peace now."
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God, I was shocked when you
you know,
said that.
how about
That
cry
is
with
so
me
awful.
for 2 minutes? just give me 2 minutes, Dad, to cry for the worst moment of our life, and then we can talk about this
But
aspect for
you
you.
understand he had to look at it that way to deal with his own
Yeah.
grief, right?
Oh
Yeah.
my God, 100%. And he had
Yeah.
been accepting it earlier than me. Yeah, we all have our own coping strategies. And I will say that does offer now in the rearview mirror, it does offer me some comfort. And it is true, which was not really true necessarily in the same way for your son, which was that Andy was in so much pain. And there are
Right.
people who are going through so much profound pain.
Right.
And I believe it was his choice to take his
Yeah.
own life. We'll never know
Right.
what the truth is, but we have a
Right.
pretty good idea. Look, some of the stories we tell ourselves, and sometimes they're true and sometimes they're not, but we all have different ways of looking at things. And sometimes that
Right.
even changes, depending on
Right.
the day or the week or the mood you're in, you know.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think it's this integration and this the learning piece of staying open and curious that is the gold mining.
Right. I agree. Yeah. How can I look at the world differently now that I've been through this? I think that's a
Yeah.
worthy question to ask yourself while you're grieving. How do I see the
Yeah.
world differently now?
And I think that if we look at really horrible things happening to us as this is fucked and this is unfair, I think the person who looks at it that way, that person is more likely to attract another bad thing in their life than the person who's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, this is
Yeah.
what this was about. They're going to walk and move towards the light because of the way they're metabolizing it more than the person who just is dug in and just
Yeah.
so angry.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, it's just speculation.
Yeah. Right.
I want something for my good attitude. At least I,
Right. You're
like,
talking about
sure,
karma.
that's not the way life works, unfortunately.
Right. I will say one of the things that Ulset changed in me is I'm not afraid of other people's grief. So I can go deep with somebody who's had a
Yeah,
loss. Or I just know how to be there and how to witness. And like, I know
totally.
you can't fix them. I know you can't say anything. But I have a friend whose 30 something year old son dropped dead in his apartment. They had no idea that he had any health issue whatsoever. He
What
was
about
a six.
autopsy? There was nothing.
Oh, yeah, he had a heart attack, but
Right.
nobody knew that he had a heart condition until he died in his apartment. I mean, imagine the shock as a parent. Now, of course, our losses are completely different in every way, but we've grown closer as friends because I could sit with him and listen to him talk about his son and cry about his son and not be freaked out about it. And some of his very close friends, especially men, sadly, can't talk about it with him. They're too freaked out.
I mean, that is another gift that we've both been granted with our grief. Like this week, we went to the pediatricians and the nurse practitioner, who Amanda and I just were loving. It was the second time we saw her, and she was just had such a spark and was such a magnetic person. And then it came up because we're talking about kids, because Asher, and she said, "I lost my 15-year-old daughter." Coming up in natural conversation, and immediately this joyful conversation shifted, and I very quickly shared about Andy, and we just immediately opened up another whole portal into connectivity and love between us. And neither of
Yeah.
us went back on our heels,
Right.
just towards each other, you know?
Yeah.
And so
Right.
it was just right. And
Yeah.
it was just a beautiful thing.
Yeah. You never
And,
know who's
and
walking around with that kind of loss in their heart.
exactly.
You
It
don't
happened
know.
10 years ago. And she
Yeah.
was particularly happy. And she said that it actually eventually, after the horror, helped her become an even more positive person. She's like, I don't worry about small shit anymore. After what I
Well,
went
that's
through, I don't
absolutely.
worry about like someone cuts me off in traffic, or like this is the example she gave. I'm not gonna fucking I have bigger fish to fry, and I have more happiness to have now. Right?
It changed me as a businesswoman because I was really type A and I wanted everything to be a certain way. When people didn't follow through or people screwed up what they were doing, I had a temper and it came out at work. Well, how important is it changed dramatically after Nathan died. And I had much deeper patience, and I was just much calmer in the way that I handled business things before and after, because what was important had shifted.
Whoa. And that was
I
immediate,
forgot
or
about
that took
that.
was that immediate, or did that
I
take
don't
you
know.
a little while?
I would say it was immediate.
Oh,
Um,
wow. So for me, I was at my most successful in real estate while Andy was dying, literally, like had more deals on the table, at a level
yeah,
of my career that I had never been at. Leading up to his death in the last years before, I had been more and more controlled as I got older. Much more. I was wild when I was younger. I don't know how much you remember me, but I was like devil may care, loose cannon, disorganized, late, and then becoming a real estate agent in Manhattan. Those qualities don't really square with that career. And so I became much
yeah,
more controlled. And then after Andy died, I became even more controlled. And
yeah,
now I'm trying my best to not be, but I'm struggling with that. I would say Amanda would definitely, if she were sitting here, she would say that I definitely still struggle with the need for control. And I don't know that I could say I've gotten better. I would say I've gotten worse. Sounds like that you got a lot better.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, look at that. Think about that, David. That's interesting.
I know, I know. But at the same time, I am still relatively early. I'm
Well,
definitely in
that's
the second
true.
stage.
That's true. Yeah, it takes a long, long time, and it's definitely an evolution.
Right.
Um, yeah, yeah. I would
I
say it
mean,
helped me in business because for two things happened. Work became therapeutic because it was a place I could go and
oh,
really
yeah,
focus on something and
yeah, I
not think
love.
about how I was feeling for a while. And so that was really helpful to me because I couldn't feel it all the time. I just,
I know, I get
yeah,
it. I was the same way.
yeah, yeah. And on the other hand, my fuse was much longer because I knew what really mattered. And
Mm.
in the end, I mean, I wanted to do well business wise, but it was didn't hold a candle to my marriage, my friends, my son. Those things were so important.
And
So,
now it seemed like the pain is long behind you, and you're moving into the twilight years. You're on your way
yeah,
now to
I know it's crazy. How did I get this old? I don't know. But yes, right. Retirement and living in New Mexico. And
in the
like I
house.
said, yeah, I'm in the New Mexico
You're
house. I'm on my last adventure. And I don't know where it's
yeah,
going to take me because even though we're very happy here, our roots aren't that deep. So who knows what'll happen and how things will morph and change. But it's
yeah.
been very exciting to move to a new place and make new friends and engage with a new community. Being in someplace beautiful and watching sunrises and sunsets, that part's great. But also, I was feeling like had a family, check. Had a career, check. Now what am I supposed to do? Just read books and die? That didn't sound good. Play some golf. So now it's just sort of shook everything up. All the old patterns have been busted up and we're creating a new life here. And it's exciting.
It is exciting. I imagine when a transition this large that is not born out of a loss or anything
Yeah,
bad does
right.
have that leaving on an international trip feel to it, right?
Yeah,
That giddy
right.
birth feeling.
Howard and I have wanted to live in the mountains since we got married. And we've talked about
Wow.
it off and on for 40 years. And
Whoa.
finally, I turned to him and said, if we're going to do this, we got to do it. And so we just did it. We just jumped into the
Yeah,
deep end, and it's been great.
that's beautiful. Are you actually in the
Yeah.
mountains now?
Yeah, we're in the southern part of the Rocky Mountains. We look at a beautiful mountain range out of our backyard. I watch the sunrise every morning over the mountains. It's gorgeous.
Mhm.
It's really special.
You might have to find a new spot for your Nathan ritual.
You know what? It just occurred to me recently before this call, but recently it's like, oh my God, I'm moving away from where he was buried. And I
Yeah,
won't be able to necessarily visit his grave on his yard site. And
right.
that feels really weird. I guess I
I
just
bet.
always assumed I'd live and die in St. Louis. But again, it's 34 years and I can deal with it. But I will always go back to St. Louis too. I have very
Yeah.
close friends and some family there, and I will find myself back in St. Louis, and I'll just have to go visit then. I mean, my dad's buried there too, and my grandparents, but it does feel weird to leave the place, to leave Nathan in
His
that
home.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's profound. Yeah.
right. Well, I have to go back to reminding myself that it's ashes in that grave now. I mean, it's not Nathan. It's just a ritual site, and I can create a
Right
new
here.
ritual. And I'll have to
Yeah.
think about how to do that to make it meaningful to me here.
You better stay a Cardinals fan.
Yeah. Oh, always.
That's not allowed. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't think New Mexico has a team. Uh,
No,
yeah,
well, I don't know. I'm not really. If they do, I don't know about it.
you're not allowed to know about it.
Yeah.
Well, it has been profound and beautiful having you on. What I like to do is usually close with I ask my guests, what is your better pill?
I'm going to quote an old friend who Ed Harris.
Oh, yeah.
There's only one way, and that's through this. You can't get around it. You can't get over it. You can't get under it. You've got to go through it. That's the only path forward, really.
Yeah.
And for me, it's been holding his memory close and finding ways to remember and to cherish the time that we did have together as I move forward with my life, and finding
Yeah.
people who can share that with me, even new friends who never knew Nathan. To me, if I get close to somebody, it's an important part of me I have to share to feel I've been fully myself with that person.
All right, we're going to take our exit now. I'll say my name. You say your name. I say the first
Okay.
half of the title of the podcast, and you say the second.
What is the second part of the podcast? Something about the pill?
swallow.
What is it?
Swallow.
To swallow. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. If you say so.
With that, I'm David Neiman.
I'm Susan Weissman.
And this has been A Better Pill
To swallow. Well, good. It wasn't too hard.